All right, welcome to Summit Stories. With you as always, Jonathan Musgrave, and I'm joined with two very special people today, Elizabeth Mortensen and Nathan Detente. Elizabeth, thanks so much for being our special guest on here. We're really glad to have you on here.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So some of you may recognize some of the faces on the screen, some of you may not. Nathan is an account manager here at Steep who works super closely with Elizabeth in the group that she works with out in Phoenix. Nathan, just before we get going here, maybe share a little bit about what it is you do here at Steep and kind of how you interface specifically with Elizabeth in their office.
Absolutely. I retired from the Navy in 2018, came on board with Steep Digital Marketing shortly thereafter. I started off in the production team, building all the websites and all the back-end integration, and then worked my way up to account management. So I work with Elizabeth now to plan out campaigns. We try to plan a year out in advance. But that experience with the production side really gives me an insight as her account manager to know what's going well with the campaign, what's going wrong. But it's really a pleasure to work with their team and plan events out and see them be successful.
Awesome. Cool. And then Elizabeth, kind of our guest of honor here, this is the first time on Summit Stories we've had anybody other than an advisor on here as our guest. And I thought this would be a good experience because Nathan tells me, and of course we've had the experience of working together as well, but Nathan tells me all the time, he's like, Elizabeth is my favorite person to work with. I wish everybody that we worked with was as sharp and on top of things and just attentive to detail. And so I think that there's a lot to really benefit for advisors and marketing directors like yourself, understanding, how do I set up a marketing team? What do I task people with my office to do? What sort of things are really important to measure? Like, what is it like the little steps that end up to the big success that we're looking for? So I'm excited to have you on here, and obviously kudos to you for helping build an awesome practice. But just kind of by way of introduction, maybe tell us a little bit about exactly what your role is and what you're tasked with doing, and kind of how long you've been at the firm, and some about your background and role there.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I have been with Strategy Financial Group for 7 years, but I've known Calvin Getz, who is the founder, for 15 years. I have nearly 20 years of experience in marketing, but not just in financial services, in several different industries. And I've always been a generalist with pretty strong project management skills to go along with my marketing experience. And my role here is marketing director, and I'm also part of the leadership team. But my main responsibility is planning and strategizing the marketing for the firm and executing on that plan. And then working closely with the team and delegating to the team what we need so that we can successfully execute all of that.
That's a lot of responsibility. I know as an office of your size is spending a lot of money on marketing, making a big investment on that. And you're kind of the one in the office with your hands on the purse string. So you are the traffic director, making sure that all the different vendor partners you work with are kind of working in accordance with one another. Elizabeth, maybe you could just give us a little overview of, obviously we do some workshops together with Steep, but I know you have other marketing funnels as well. What are kind of the big, like top 3 or 4 marketing funnels that you guys are utilizing?
Yeah, I'll steal this term from Calvin. He just used this on a call that we had. We are still seminar junkies. We are heavily dependent on events. Dinner seminars are not dead. While we're continually massaging our strategy with those, they're still very much alive. Our educational workshops have been wonderful with us, as Nathan can attest to. So we've expanded those. So our event strategy is 2-part, the food and non-food. And then we are going to be jumping into a digital program here pretty soon. So I'm ramping up a digital strategy and probably executing that over the next 2, maybe 3 months. So for Q1, we're hoping to have a more comprehensive digital campaign. We've really only dipped our toes in digital off and on. A lot of our focus with digital has been to support our events, but now we're going to try to do lead gen and brand positioning with digital. And then we are also going to be doing some TV as well. So some major Q1 goals for us.
Awesome. Well, I love hearing new things. I'm one of those people who I love learning and implementing new ideas. And it's almost more fun for me to like figure out or crack the code on something that we haven't done before, as it is to just implement tried and proven programs that we have done before. So that idea of getting something new off the ground is really exciting to me. And that sounds cool. So specifically with the events, I know you and Nathan work really closely together to schedule that out. And I know there's a whole other planning process internally that you guys go through. And Nathan, I'd love to hear your feedback on this as well. But I think one of the challenges with event marketing is that there's like this long runway, right? And knowing, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, what you're going to do, it's a lot of work. And you got to plan the venues. You got to make sure you're not saturating other campaigns you're doing. Maybe you're dancing around other people that might try to be using the same venue, and a number of different things. I think one of the things that has helped you guys have a lot of success with that is just being able to have a little bit more foresight and look a little bit down the road. But to both of you, I'd be interested to hear kind of what that planning process looks like, and maybe some input or advice that you could share with other advisors on tips and tricks that you've learned about having that foreknowledge and anticipation of events so that you can implement at scale.
I'll be happy to go first. My lights just went out in my office, so that's okay. I'm going to leave them off. You might come back on, but I'll be happy to go first if that's okay, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've developed to a point now where we plan our events for the upcoming year. They're planned by the end of Q3 of the current year. And so that means that the calendar, the days are chosen, the venues are chosen, pretty much locked down at that point as well. So advisors' calendars are updated. Everything is pretty much set in place by Q3. And then our full marketing plan is finalized by December of the current year. And then the importance of that is, especially in a market like ours, which is a large city, and it's also very highly competitive for our industry, is we get the days in the venues that we want. There are several factors that could be impacting what you want from an event standpoint, such as not just availability, but cost, right? So, we don't want to be stuck going to a venue that is outside of the budget that we want to stay around because we didn't plan early enough, or isn't in an area of the Phoenix metro area that we want to be in that particular time of year. So our population can vary depending on the time of year. Like summers here, especially in particular regions, are very slow, right? So we have to plan around that. So those are a couple of the benefits that come from planning in advance. And then, as in terms of working with Steve, then I can kind of lock down those territories and own those territories and know that they're secured for us with Nathan. So those are some of the benefits from my point of view.
Awesome. Well, no, it's an awesome experience for our team to just be able to partner and get that stuff planned out. Nathan, maybe you could add a little bit to how you see that benefiting the marketing performance, and even maybe what advice you would offer other people who haven't had this experience working along with Elizabeth and her team.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth really sets the bar for all the other marketing directors I work for. She's the most organized, thoughtful planning, very wise in venue selection and rotating to make sure territories don't get saturated. And her vision, long-term vision, to be able to see where she wants to be, when she wants to be there, and then communicating that with us really makes it fun and simple to organize her marketing strategy plan and make sure that each of those events as they run is successful. Ultimately, it comes down to understanding what Elizabeth's definition of success is, not just running an event to run an event, but are we hitting the ROI numbers? Are they setting the appointments that they want to set? But she makes that really, really a fun process because she's so organized and communicates so well. I think the other advantage of having that plan that far out Some advisors are hesitant to put orders far into the future because maybe they don't have marketing credit yet. They haven't built up the income to maybe pay for an event further down the road. But the way we operate is we will go ahead and plan things out, and I will reserve that territory for them. And then I, as the account manager, I just mark those orders. Hey, check in with Nathan before we build this out. And what that allows us to do is to check in with Elizabeth and say, hey, we're getting ready to build this seminar on this night. Has the venue changed? Has the time changed? Are we changing topics? And really just checking in with Elizabeth to make sure we're moving forward one at a time, even though we have a year planned out. And how that benefits them is that their territory is secure. And then it allows me to check with her. And if anything changes, she doesn't pay a change fee or any type of cancellation fees or rush fees or anything like that, because we're methodically moving through the plan that we've established. But the biggest thing is her planning really allows her to control that territory. I'm sure you'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but Phoenix, the area they're operating in, is my most competitive market in the country. It used to be California, but after COVID, a lot of advisors moved, and a lot of advisors in a lot of other states are on a wait list to run the programs that they're running in those territories. So her plan really allows her to hold and control that territory there.
Awesome. Yeah. One thing I always like to tell people when we're talking about territories is that territory management is not something that benefits Steep, really. In fact, it probably costs us a lot of money because we're turning away orders that we otherwise could have gotten. We could make 3 times more money in Phoenix if we just took everybody's order. But we know that like our primary objective and our core value that's posted all over our office is that our advisor success is the most important thing to us. We know if we create success for them, then we don't have to worry about our success, because if you're profitable and it works for you, then you'll probably come back and keep doing campaigns with us. So we do that primarily because we just want to make sure that we're ensuring the integrity of the market long-term and being able to deliver results on each campaign that we do. Elizabeth, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about reporting and kind of results. And I know, having talked with you before, and also some of the things that Nathan has shared with me, there's a pretty specific way that you guys analyze results from a campaign. I'd love to hear just a little bit about what are the key performance indicators that you're accountable for, and how do you identify when a marketing initiative that you're doing is really successful?
Yes. So, well, our overall goal as a company is to grow our new assets every year by at least 26%. And the main KPI that I track against that is the number of completed first appointments per month. So that's the number one indicator for us. And then in terms of our seminars, we follow the 70-70-30 benchmark. I believe that was a Joel Johnson Rainmaker benchmark practice. So what that means is at our events, we aim to schedule 70% of the attendees. So 70% of the attendees schedule first appointments. And then of those who schedule a first appointment, 70% of those complete their first appointments. And then of the people who complete a first appointment, 30% of those convert to clients. So those are the benchmarks that we follow. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, no, I think that's really the kind of segue there is those are the key analytics you're paying attention to. And then, you've got kind of this formulaic way of looking at responses to understand, like, hey, was the money we invested in this marketing program good? So I think that is kind of an answer into itself, is just, you've got your 70% show set, 30%, 70-70-30. So 70% show, 70% set the appointment and show up, and then 30% close. So I think that's a very, very important thing that I see some people missing the ball on is, we're doing a lot of events now that we're calling each time after an advisor completes an event. We say, how many people showed up? How many people set an appointment? You'd be surprised to hear the number of people, even 2 or 3 days after the event, that don't know those numbers. And we think that that's a really critical part of it. So what you see on the screen in front of you now is the actual marketing strategy plan that we worked together with Elizabeth and Nathan to put together. And I think it's one thing to have this idea of like, okay, we're tracking numbers and we have a schedule that we're building out in the future. It's another thing to kind of see what that looks like. And so Nathan, maybe you could walk us through just a little bit on, how it is that you kind of administer this from the account manager side. And then Elizabeth, maybe you could talk to some of the benefits or qualities that you have just having this in one central location that you can both reference.
Yeah, so it starts with an initial conversation about what is on the horizon for their office. Where are they thinking about running? What type of event or what program are they going to run? Who's the presenter? Then I go into a territory research, make sure that obviously everything's open and available. There's no competition there. There's no saturation issues that we should be concerned about. And then I plan it out. So I like to start with a medium audience size. For a seminar, I'd like to start with at least 60,000 people in the demographic, and then go up from there. So then I map out, well, if we're at this venue, here's how far out we're running the ads, and then be real strategic in where we're placing those ad sets. Then we just develop this and we just start listing this out, and it allows me to track, what's the order deadline. So we have plenty of time to get this built, get it over to Elizabeth to review and approve it. Is it already ordered? Is it pending an order? That way we can know together, are we on the same page? Is the event ordered? Are we building it? That way nothing falls through the cracks. And then it allows us to track, big things like what was the target household registration number that we are striving to hit together. And then are we above that number? Or are we below that number? And thankfully in 2022, we've been above that number.
Awesome. Elizabeth, you find this is a helpful resource for you to be able to, and I'm sure you've got your own planning calendars that you use on your end, but has this been a helpful way for you to just kind of see at a big picture how your events with Steep are going?
Yes. It's helpful as a tool to keep Nathan and I on the same page. It's something that, he and I can hop in and out of and, make sure that everything is on track. It's a lot to manage. And I wanted to, thank Nathan for being a great partner to work with, but also echo a little bit of what he said earlier. Planning ahead like this gives us the flexibility to make changes if we needed to, right? So if I had to move a date a couple of weeks out or something like that, I work with Nathan to do that. And planning allows me to ensure that I have that territory in place and I can still make that change. And then not having to pay for that order in advance, right? Before Nathan actually checking in with me allows for a lot of that flexibility. So it's been really great working together. But yes, that's what you showed is a fantastic tool just to keep us both on the same page. Because a lot of times, it's like moving really fast, or we'll just close out a campaign and start a new one. Next year, I think I have, I could pull it up right now, but we are expanding the number of educational workshops that we're doing. And next year I have
We have 23 planned.
27, surprise. So it's just been such a successful avenue for us, and Steve and Nathan have been instrumental in that.
That's awesome to hear. When you talk about ramping up and having this ability to dynamically change, I think two things kind of come to mind. One is just being aware of trends. I feel like myself, I'm an inherent procrastinator, and I do things like at the very, very last minute. I look at long-term planning as a restriction to me, and I'm like, man, I don't want to like commit to doing that, because if I change my mind, then I'm kind of stuck in that what I've already planned to do. But I think what you said is really, really smart there, which is like when you have a long-term plan, it allows you to be agile. So instead of like, you're actually able to have more flexibility when you do have those long-term plans, which I think is really smart. The other thing that you had talked, I think, previously with us about is just some of the key indicators of success, maybe as compared to dinner workshops that you're seeing in your office. Are there any like key points of conversion, whether it's appointment setting, quality of people, appointment stick rate, that you're seeing an advantage with educational workshops as opposed to the dinner events that you're doing?
I would say first off, the number of registrants that come in. So while there's a lower, show rate, there's a lot more people going into our database and into our nurtures and into other campaigns. So that's a benefit. There's definitely a cost benefit, right? Because now a restaurant is not in play. And our cost per new client on our educational events is much lower than our dinner events, like a third.
Wow.
And what else would I say?
I think you'd mentioned appointment show rate was something that had been a differentiator, like more of the appointments that book are showing through educational. Is that something?
Yeah, and that's been a change for us this year. It's increased quite a bit since last year. So our appointment show rates for the educational workshops are higher than our dinners this year. And also it's a little bit less fuss because you're not, dealing with the restaurant, you're not dealing with order taking before your presentation starts. So it's, there are a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah. One of the things I think that I want to make sure we take away from this is, I think the people watching this video are going to be equally split between marketing directors and advisors. And we talked a lot about, from a marketing director standpoint, how planning and working together as a team can make a big difference. I'd love to hear a little bit about what feedback you might offer to advisors who probably have people in the same capacity as you do. What would you advise to somebody to really empower their marketing staff to plan effectively and to implement a plan? I know myself as a business owner, I'm that impulsive guy who's like ready, fire, aim. And that's not always a good thing when it comes to marketing. And I feel like when you have people on your team like Elizabeth, who, they're planners and they're executors and they can get things done, giving them enough leash and really giving them clear direction and letting them do their thing is really important. But I don't know if you have any insight or feedback on what you would encourage other advisors to do in relation to their marketing teams.
Well, first, I would say to anyone who doesn't have a dedicated marketing person and is looking for one, invest in a quality, marketing person with experience. But try to find somebody who is capable of multi-dimensional thinking. So you want that creative and marketing skill and experience, but you also want somebody who's able to manage and analyze data, and somebody who has strong, project management skills. It really is a comprehensive position. A lot of firms are small, so you're not going to have a team of 3 people doing each of those things, right? But if you have somebody, or once you have that person, I would say put them in a position of empowerment. If your goals are to grow, then you're a marketing company first, right? So you need to empower that person who's in charge of your marketing. Listen to them, give them the availability to bring suggestions to you and their ideas to you. Allow them to prove their value to you. I would also say that communicate with them very regularly. Have your weekly meetings in between, whatever it takes, so that you're always on the same page, and that your vision and your goals are always very clear. And allow them the time and the resources to actually test campaigns. A lot of times, there are one-off tests, or, maybe an event is tested, but it's then tested in 3 different areas. That's not really an accurate test. There's external factors involved. So allow them proper testing, because that's, a lot of what marketing is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, we probably run more ads that don't work than ones that do work. But when you find one that works, now you've got something super efficient that you can deploy and run. Same thing goes with events as a whole. So I think that's really, really important. One of the things that I know, just from having spoken with Nathan, that you in your office have a very specific way that you do confirmations for events. And you mentioned that one of the downsides with doing educational events is that a lot of times you will have a higher drop off between registration and attendance, which is certainly the case, not just with Seat, but pretty much any digital vendor out there. But I know that maximizing the number of registrations to attendees, like that rate, is really, really a critical part of success. I'd love to hear kind of what that process looks like. Who is it on your team that does that, and kind of what your touch points are along the way?
Sure. And I will just give you some numbers. I think we went from a 30, maybe 25% to 30 percent attendance rate to, we're at like 40% this year.
Awesome. Good.
So our process is, once we receive the registration, our team, my team, so I have a team of administrative assistants who the first thing they do is they'll actually vet the registrant. This is not something that every firm does, but we do, we find it important. So first off, we'll make sure that they're not another agent or broker. And then also we actually don't allow people to attend our events more than once, unless they attended, 3+ years ago. So if any of those are found, then they're uninvited, nicely. And then, however, anyone who moves forward will then get a phone call within 24 hours, just confirming that we've received their registration and we look forward to seeing them at the event. And then after that, well, for steep campaigns, steeps, texts, and emails then go out periodically until the event date. And then internally, we actually mail out like a 1-page event information sheet to all of the registrants. And the day before the event, we call and text every registrant. And we ask them to, well, we say that we assume that, we imply that we assume that they're coming, but if they are not coming, we would appreciate if they could let us know. Because then that just gives my team a good idea of how to prepare for the events, and estimate, how many people we think are actually going to show up.
Awesome. I think that's such a critical part of it. And Nathan, I know you work with a lot of other advisors as well. And I know you can speak to the fact that makes such a huge difference in the overall outcome of it. At the end of the day, there is an extent to which the marketing company or any marketing vendor is limited in how far we can push the ball downfield. We can get it right to that 1-yard line, but so many of those like personal touches that you do along the way just make a huge impact in it. But Nathan, I believe, and clarify if I'm wrong, but you talked a little bit with you and I internally about follow-up after the event as well. Have you guys had that discussion in terms of like, okay, the event's done, you got the appointments you got, then now like, what are you doing to touch those people from that point on?
Yeah, it's really it's interesting to see the variety, different advisors and teams that some people have a really good follow-up process like Elizabeth and her team do. Some advisors don't. If they didn't send an appointment, I've heard people say I don't even call them. If they didn't send an appointment at the seminar, I won't even call them. Don't have them in a drip email. And we always encourage to always, engage with them in a drip email campaign or a call campaign or invite to a future event. Maybe you ran a seminar and then you invite them to a webinar or a client event. Multiple touches in there to nurture that lead. Elizabeth and her team do a really good job of following up with people after an event. And I think that's the #1 key to their success is the personal attention that her and her team put into the confirmation process, how they treat everybody there and actually execute the seminar, but also the follow-up process as well. And you would be surprised at how many people are missing that aspect of their marketing plan. And that's why they bounce from dinners to educational to webinars. And they don't see the continued success that you're seeing and the growth that you're seeing year over year. And I believe personally, that's the key element that they're missing is what you and your team are doing through that entire process.
Elizabeth, can you explain a little bit about what the post-event confirm process looks like, whether someone attended or did not attend? What does your team do after the event to call people and stay in touch with them?
Absolutely. So after the event, every attendee gets a phone call from someone on the team, thanking them for coming. And then if they did schedule an appointment, then the appointment details are, they're reminded of that on the phone. And then, so that's the morning after. The morning after, they also get an email with a video message from the presenter, thanking them for coming. And that's also bifurcated depending on whether or not an appointment was scheduled. And then the appointment details are included in the email for those. And then beyond that, then we have different nurtures based on the status of the registrant. So there's a nurture for attended scheduled appointments, everything leading up to the appointment. Then there's a nurture for attended, did not schedule appointment. There's a nurture for, no shows and cancels. And the aim of, those nurtures is everything that Nathan's mentioned. You want to invite them to another event. You offer a 15-minute call, all of that, but you just want to keep them engaged. And we get a lot of feedback, even unprompted, from people registrants who the last minute couldn't make it, and they just really want to go to the next one and want to make sure we tell them when that next one is.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that you're able to pick up additional appointments scheduled after the event, or do you feel like the appointment scheduling opportunity is kind of capped at the live event itself?
They're pretty much maximized at the live event, but we will pick some up, and that's something that I miss. I'm sorry, we do call people who did not schedule an appointment. We do call them for several weeks until we either get an answer, or it's just we didn't get anywhere with them. And we do once in a while pick up one or two here or there, but it's pretty minimal.
Yeah.
What their next action really is attending, a future event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that may be surprising to people to learn is that Steep, as a marketing company, like where our number one lead source is. And, we do event marketing. We tell advisors to be spending money on digital traffic. We do a ton of advertising on Facebook. But our personal number one marketing channel is actually our email. And every Tuesday we write a simple email. We call it an email blast. I think sometimes everyone has this idea of implementing a marketing strategy, that like an email strategy, that's so complicated. We've got all these dials and automations and this and that. And you can certainly build that in. Nathan does a ton of that here on our team internally. But I think if you're not doing nurtures already, and if you don't have that set up, like literally just creating an email a week that you could send out to people with some valuable information is really all it takes. And what's interesting is that sometimes the responses you get to emails have nothing to do with the emails you actually get. Our email that we sent out today was asking for people to take a survey on a new product that we're trying to build that's all about YouTube. And it's interesting. I got 2 or 3 responses from people that are like, hey, I want to do this movie event that you guys are doing, or I want to do a webinar, this fall. And so I think just staying top of mind with people and giving them that email communication is a really, really important thing. But I think that's something you guys, obviously, you've got a very structured path that people go through based on kind of what their interaction with you up until that point had been. That's awesome. But I think my encouragement to people listening is that even if you don't have all these like wizard automations, just saying it in front of people and offering good information is so critical. And the other last bit of input I'll put on that is that it's pretty apparent when you're sending something that you actually wrote versus something that is very generic. And there's so many services out there that advisors have access to for content that's compliant and ready to go. You can just grab this like bucket of emails and start spraying them out to your list. There's a massive difference in like content that's created internally that's specific to you and your brand and your mission, where you are, who you are. And that resonates to people. People see authenticity more than anything else. And so I think just spending the time, literally 15, 20 minutes a week to craft an email and send it out, or create paths like you have, I think it's even better. But sometimes we mystify this idea of email marketing in our minds. And it's really as simple as just giving people access to you. And that's really our objective as marketers. It's not to sell people. Like there's other people in our office that sell stuff. Our job is to create conversations. And those conversations are email interactions, they're text interactions, they're phone calls, they're meetings in our office. But I think when we change our thinking a little bit away from just like, hey, we're here to sell stuff, to just let's create a conversation, then it makes our job a lot easier to you actually able to implement it. Elizabeth, I know we're kind of near the end of the year. It's October 25th when we're recording this, and you've got 2023 out in front of you. I'd be interested to hear what sort of changes did you sense throughout 2022, and how are you going to capitalize on some of those things starting in the next year? I know you mentioned ramping up event volume a little bit, adding in some new things, but how do you kind of see like the marketing environment as a whole, what things are changing, and how are you guys going to adapt to that?
So yes, dinner seminars for us have much lower ROI and lower than they were, last year. So that trend has been going down for us. So I did an analysis of all of the venues that we use and have used for the last several years. And so I've eliminated 2 of those completely. And that way our dollars are focused on, the venues and areas that we have decent ROI on. And I have decreased the number of dinner seminars in general. And I have added quite a lot more educational events. And so I planned out all of the territories that we have been in this past year. And I've added 2, I think, new territories. And so, I've had to kind of plan that out so that, as Nathan said, we're not overlapping or cannibalizing any of our other campaigns. And, we're kind of moving around the valley in a strategic way and trying to avoid some of those, external factors that can impact us. So yeah, so those are our major changes is we're decreasing dinners. I've eliminated specific venues and we're increasing our educational events.
Mhm. I think it's a very interesting observation to make. My perception, I like to tell people I feel like a lifeguard sometimes because I'm like up on this higher perspective and I'm not in the water like splashing around and hard to see. Like I can see a guy over here who's swimming really good, guy over here who's struggling, and kind of get this holistic perspective of what marketing looks like. I think coming out of COVID, like events were shut down for a period of time, and depending on what part of the country you lived in, it might have even been a longer period that you were shut down. And the very first venues when things opened back up were the ones that were hungry for revenue, and those were restaurants. And so they're like, hey, host your banquets here. And they loved advisors because they would bring 30, 40 people in. And obviously that was a huge revenue generator for restaurants that struggled through COVID. Well, a lot of advisors saw that and jumped on board. Well, in addition to the venues opening up, you also had this lull in direct mail as a whole, where there wasn't really much of an ability to use direct mail during COVID because direct mail doesn't necessarily drive people to online activities. And that was basically the only way we could interact with people was virtually online. And so undersaturated venues, undersaturated medium through direct mail. And the result of that for a lot of people, which is kind of an outsized response rate. It had become, instead of oversaturated, it had become undersaturated. People had built up all of these needs for financial advice, and that they'd gone unaddressed to a large degree. And so for a period of time coming out of COVID and even into 2022, I think you kind of saw this above average response rate to direct mail and dinner seminars. Now I think we're seeing that pendulum switch back to the other direction. If there was a venue that was slow to open, it was a library or college, because so many of them have affiliations with local government that were actually enacting COVID policy. And so they were very strict about allowing groups to come back. In some parts of the country, if you can believe it, there's still some restrictions that are lingering in some of these venues. But for the most part, things are open now. And so we know the venues had been underutilized. At the same time, people had not been using digital for that. And so I think you're seeing, as the pendulum shifts back, you're seeing an undersaturated, underserved market that's kind of over responding right now. And I expect that trend to continue with digital going into next year. But I think it's really smart to try to exploit that in your marketing system and just, strike while the iron's hot, get back to doing the event types that maybe other people in your market hadn't been doing. So I think it's really cool. The other thing that's interesting, just as I'm talking out loud here, and this is unsolicited advice, but I think that one of the things that I perceive is that the people who come to a dinner seminar are totally different people than come to an educational workshop. And I've had advisors ask this question before at a dinner seminar: raise your hand if you've been to one before, and half the room raises their hand. Do the same thing at a library or college, and it's like, 15, 20% of the room raises their hand. On one hand, you have people who are coming into an idea, like an event that kind of has this idea of reciprocity in it, like, hey, I'm feeding you this dinner and I'd love to meet with you afterward. And people kind of accept that. But there's a whole other group of people who don't want to be in that environment. And so I think that I have nothing against dinner seminars, and I have no specific allegiance to educational seminars. But I think the important thing to understand is, if we truly believe that we have 2 different buyer types, then this is more of a diversification strategy than anything. The ability to get in front of these guys and get in front of these guys with 2 totally separate mediums. So I like that idea of kind of sharing, and especially in a situation like yours where you guys have a big marketing goals. You want to bring in a ton of new business. you probably couldn't get there with 100% steep events, and you probably couldn't get where you want to go with 100% dinners. So being able to diversify and have a higher number of events in total, hitting two different groups of people is a really great strategy. So it's interesting. Cool.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a mix. And I don't think there's too much, I mean, I don't have data to back this up, but I don't think there's a lot of overlap between the people who are attending dinner events and educational events.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree with you there that they are very two different types of shoppers.
Yeah. And when you analyze the funnel, appointment set rate, appointment stick rate, and close rate, like we talked about earlier, if you see those rates diverge from each other from two different mediums, it tells you the buyers are responding differently to that same process. So definitely an interesting thing to pull apart.
Hey, Jonathan, one of the biggest things that I have found interesting in 2022 and coming out of COVID, a lot of advisors were staying in their county or certain counties around them. The biggest thing that's caught my curiosity this year is how many advisors are not just operating in farther counties away from where they normally do, but a lot of them are now licensed in multiple states and they're running campaigns in different states. And so, for example, in the Phoenix area, I'll get requests from people living in Texas or Florida, Utah, that have offices over there, don't even have an office in the state, but they're interested in running campaigns. And I found that really interesting how COVID almost opened the door wide open for people to consider doing marketing in areas and states and across the country, even where they never even thought about that before, or maybe were scared of doing something like that before. It kind of knocked that wall down and seems like it's opened the opportunities wide up for people to move around.
Yeah, I think it's changed, the buying behavior. Absolutely. It was pretty clear pre-COVID that a lot of people who were looking for a financial advisor wanted to meet them in person, wanted somebody local. And, COVID made them a lot more comfortable doing business online. So that changed a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Are you guys finding that you're doing appointments now, even after COVID, that are virtual through Zoom or other, like through phone calls that you traditionally wouldn't have done?
Oh, much more than we ever did. I mean, we still try to get the in-person appointment. That's always the priority for us. And we market locally. But we do a lot more phone calls and virtuals than ever.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it just kind of changed the way that everybody thinks. I mean, there's so many people work from home. I know Nathan's working from home today. We kind of realized that the way that we've always done things isn't necessarily the way we have to do them. And it sped up that adoption curve, especially with the senior demographic. And now we're kind of living in a different normal. And it's very interesting to see how that's all played out. But well, Elizabeth, I super appreciate you being on here. I think you're kind of I wish I had a mold of Elizabeth that I could just stamp out and help other advisors, because I think what you bring to the practice is so valuable. I think even the fact that obviously you're in marketing and you're planning these events, working with vendors, but even working on the executive side with the office, I think that may be the biggest proof of value that you have in the business is that, you said it earlier, every business is a marketing business. It just so happens that you provide financial services on the back end. And when you can elevate and understand the importance that marketing has in the entire productivity of the business, I think it's just so critical. But it's not necessarily possible unless you have people that are super capable to, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, integrate with vendors, have this long-term perspective on planning and attention to detail along the way. So I certainly learned a lot through this process. These are things that I'll kind of continue to coach advisors through. And I know anybody watching this, whether advisors or marketing directors, will really benefit. So appreciate you sharing openly with us and being an awesome partner with Steep too.
Thank you, Jonathan and Nathan. Thank you both. It's been a pleasure working with both of you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.